very first miniatures I ever collected were Warhammer Fantasy Wood Elf Army, starting when I was 10 years old, and one of the coolest things was this diorama by Mike McPhee. And since then, I've wanted to make a Wood Elf diorama. So today, that's what we're doing. In this video, we're making a realistic forest waterfall diorama. Let's get to it. I start with a square piece of 1-inch insulation foam. I did a little sketch beforehand, so I knew I wanted a water feature in the front corner. With a hot wire cutter, I cut the foam into a rough shape. Now I had in mind sort of a diving board of rock to form the focal point of the diorama. For the rocks, I'm going to use bark chips that I got in the landscaping section of Home Depot. Now bark chips have these awesome layers that add a lot of natural looking detail. So to create a rock wall at the back of the piece, I put a thin piece of foam as a backing and start adding thin slices of bark. I'm trying to get a natural look here, so I'm careful to make the striations in the rock all pointing in relatively the same direction. They may change slightly across the piece, but that just gives it a cool metamorphic vibe that enhances the organic feel of the scene. I leave a little gap at the top for the waterfall to come down through, and then I make sure there's a nice level area that a model can stand on in the front. Now with my rock forms blocked in, I glue the piece to a pine base from the craft store. This will give it some more height and structure and protect the bottom corners of the piece, in much the same way that a VPN protects your data while you surf the internet. Wow, was that another buttery smooth ad transition from your boy? Sure was, guys. Today's sponsor is NordVPN, and to use a hobby analogy, a VPN is like wearing nitrile gloves for your data. NordVPN adds extra safety to your internet connection and has a threat protection feature. NordVPN can also be used to watch your favorite streaming shows that aren't normally available in your geographic area. Let's say you want to watch the new Legolas spin-off on Netflix, for example, but it isn't available in your country. Simply activate NordVPN, change your location to a country that offers the show, you can catch up on all the latest episodes. Now, NordVPN has done the tests, and they are the fastest VPN in the world. Today, guys, NordVPN is totally risk-free, as they're currently offering a 30-day money-back guarantee, so it's a great time to try it out at nordvpn.com/eric. A link will be in the description below. It really helps the channel when you guys support the sponsors who support me, and let's be honest, some of you guys have been thinking about trying out a VPN for a while now and just needed a little nudge, so hopefully I've convinced you. Thanks NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the build. Moving on with the rock face, I mix up a nice bowl of Sculpt-A-Mold modeling compound. And then I smush that in all over the piece. I cover up the lake bottom, put some thick mossy areas on the flat rock surfaces, and press it into the rock face itself. I then come in with a stiff bristled craft brush which I wet in some water and push the Sculpt-A-Mold into all the cracks, trying to keep the same pattern of roughly horizontal striations with my brush strokes. This will make it look like a unified rock face rather than a bunch of recognizable nuggets of bark. Now as this dries, I come in with a wire brush, deepening the striations, and then smoothing with a wet paintbrush until I'm happy with the finish. I add some loose rock bits at the top and bottom of the waterfall using super glue and some accelerant, and then I leave that to dry. Now it actually has this really cool kind of winter vibe at this point, and I considered changing tack and making a snowy diorama, but I decided to stay focused and keep with the original plan. I'll tackle some wintry scenes in a future video. Make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss that. With everything now reasonably dry, I decided to try out my newest toy, an airbrush, and painted everything with Vallejo black primer. I then came in from above with a white primer, giving a nice pattern of highlights and shadows already. At this point, I really like where it's going and I'm getting excited, so I decided to shade the rocks with some brown ink, but after a quick test, the nut brown ink that I had was too red, so I ended up using some Citadel Skeleton Horde contrast paint. Now this stuff is expensive, so it pains me to use on something like this, but you don't need that much and it's worth it. So I just gently shade the rocks a nice yellowish brown color, making sure it's not too uniform, so there's some areas of gray, some areas of darker color, to get a nice natural effect. Next I mix up a nice blue-green, and I use that to block in the color for the bottom of the lake. I also put a few touches of this color around the rest of the piece to tie everything together with a nice atmospheric feel. This is one of the huge advantages of using an airbrush. You can really control the color palette by integrating colors from one piece onto another with just a little gentle spray. I really like this tool. With some lighter, more yellow-green, I block in some areas of moss catching the sunlight and touch the cliff here and there to indicate a nice verdant feel. For a little forest sunlight, I mixed in some brighter yellow-green for highlight on top of that. This is looking pretty awesome already, but I want to add some trees. Now my trees are going to be dead simple for this, just sticks. Now I always previously felt like trees had to have a ton of foliage for a diorama, but this year Andy Wardle won the Golden Demon with stick trees, and even though his was a winter scene, I think I can get away with it too. Now in my opinion, the best sticks for trees are from hedges. They just branch more often, which makes them look better at a miniature scale. So with a nice hedge stick that I cut from a not very visible piece of the hedge in my front yard, I drill a hole in the bottom, super glue in a length of wire, and then drill a corresponding hole on the base. To paint the trees, I'm going for a dead simple scheme as well, just black and green. I noticed this the other day when it was raining, that the trunks of the trees near me looked pretty much black when they were wet, and the green moss on the trunks really popped with that overcast light. So since I wanted my diorama to have this wet, dark forest feel, I simply primed the trees black, and then sprayed a few greens from mostly a top right angle to get a unified light effect, pick out some of that detail, and get the feeling I was going for. I'm going to make the waterfall from this DAP Ultra Clear stuff. This was recommended to me ages ago by Luke from Geek Gaming Scenics. I put down some parchment paper, lay out a few beads, and then spread it fairly thinly with a sculpting tool. It's a good idea to lay out more of these than you think you'll need. I'll set that aside to dry, and we'll come back to that later. Since the water effects step is coming up, I clean my desk really thoroughly. I don't want any of the dust or debris from the previous steps getting sealed into my water, spoiling the effect. The trees look awesome on there, but I'm not going to glue them in, so I can still remove them to get at the waterfall. Now that the DAP Ultra Clear is dry, let's apply these strips to make the waterfall. I carefully peel the strips off the parchment paper. They're still quite tacky, and if you let them stick to themselves, they'll never unstick. It's kind of the texture of a fruit by the foot that's been left in a hot car. Anyways, I noticed that water tends to twist and stick to itself as it falls, probably because of surface tension. So I give a little twist to these waterfall strips and secure them in place with a bit of hot glue. On a higher velocity waterfall, the water would spray and spread out more, but this is a smaller forest waterfall where the water just tumbles over the edge without too much speed. I give a little twist to the waterfall strips to get that natural appearance, and then secure them in place with a bit of hot glue. I tried to make it look like 3 streams of water flowing naturally given the configuration of the rocks. Alright, we're basically home free, right? I just need to pour in the resin and we're pretty much done. What could go wrong? What's that music? Anyways, I'm going to use Easycast 2-part epoxy resin, which I've used plenty of times before on a number of projects and nothing has ever gone wrong. Really, why is there ominous music playing? Okay, stop the music. I glue these dams of styrene card onto my piece, spray them with mold release, and then tape them on with some white duct tape just to make sure that I don't get any leaks. It says right here on the instructions that the pour volume shouldn't exceed 6 ounces, and this volume is definitely not 6 ounces, so we're within the recommended range here. Nothing can go wrong, right? Right? So anyways, I mixed up that resin. Why is it so yellow? Previous times I used it, was it this yellow? I'm sure it's fine. Poured it in. It looks great so far. So anyways, I came back when it was dry and, okay, it's messed up. It's kind of weird. There's a lot of bubbles at the bottom. Some weird raised areas over here. Looks salvageable though. Let's take off the styrene dams and have a good look. I take off the tape, then okay, it's really stuck on there. Maybe if I use a knife. Okay, maybe a bigger knife. How about a jeweler's saw? No? Razor saw? No? Chisel? No? Okay, how about a full-size saw? You like that?
You realize, of course, this means war.
Okay, so with the Dremel attachment, I was able to grind down that polystyrene card into dust, and that was the only way I was able to get it off. I don't know what happened. I mean, you guys saw me put the mold release on there, When you have to grind off the dam, that's a pretty good sign that the mold release did not work. Well, it's a real mess now, but at this point I figured if I don't give up, I'll learn some new stuff. So I started sanding down the edge. There are these huge voids on the sides that were bubbles, and so I tried something new. Using some UV resin, I filled them in, and that actually worked remarkably well. I sanded up to the finest grit sandpaper I had on hand, wet sanding for the final step. I put some spackle on the edges to fill them in and make them smooth, and then painted everything a nice flat black. And then applied some gloss varnish to the edge. As a final touch, to make the surface of the water look rippled, I applied some gloss Mod Podge, and then spread and scattered it with some gusts from the airbrush. When that was dry, I mixed some Mod Podge with white paint, and then spread that from the base of the waterfall to simulate the churned up water at the base. And that's it. I think it turned out awesome. I've deliberately left this model flexible so that any model can pose on the end of this situation here. But the one that I think looks the best is this wood elf that I just recently got from Miniac's Kickstarter, one of the 32mm version of the wood elves that he just released. Go check him out if you're interested, they're really awesome. I think he's selling them on the Pledge Manager soon or something like that. He's not paying me to say this, he just sent me one, which was really kind of him, and I really dig this model. I'm going to use him as a War Dancer champion in my wood elf army. Once again, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to all my patrons. Your guys' help is a massive support to the channel and I really appreciate it. If you want to join my Patreon, check in the link below. You'll get access to the Discord server, other cool behind the scenes stuff, and of course giveaways of products, which I'm doing all this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.